The House will please come to order. So members, we're going to continue with third reading on House Bill 1. I'm just waiting. I know there's members just coming back from their committee meetings. Certainly respect that you've had a busy lunch hour, but let's come back together and go to work. All right, members, we're going to continue with our work. Third reading amendments, House Bill 1. Next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 16. Your attention to our presenter, please. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 16 to House Bill 1 and ask for favorable consideration. So in the Department of Health budget, there were some very serious reductions, but we didn't see much of a reduction in personnel. As we talked about on first reading of the bill, there are 1,350 FTE reduced by 6 in this budget. That's less than 0.5% in the Department of Health budget. And then on their part-time employees, they had a one-person reduction from 68. So what this amendment does is it reduces 2 full-time employees, FTEs in the director's office. And I want to be clear on this. I didn't want to reduce hospital personnel, medical facility personnel. This is within the director's office. So it's about a $200,000 savings, and it goes along the lines of what other agencies have reduced in their centralized administration. So I ask for favorable consideration on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gray. Any other members for their first time 316? Representative Larson on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And folks, I'd urge your no vote on this. The thing that concerns me when we come in and we just look at a piece of paper and we say, holy smokes, why could they not have cut more? And we heard it, and they're fair questions. And we even heard from the presenter of the amendment at one time when I was presenting, I believe, on the health facilities, why there wasn't great. Did you sit down and find out what each one of these employees do and how they do it? And no, I didn't. But I can tell you that I've sat down with this over the last year. I've sat down with this department, and on multiple occasions, multiple occasions, and have a pretty good feel of where they're at and what they recommend. So I'm comfortable with where we're at. And so what I would ask the presenter of the amendment is how many times he sat down with the director of the agency, because this is out of his office, before making this amendment to determine what those people in the director's office do that warrants the reduction that he's doing. If he's done that, and there's, and he still feel that it warrants, then I think carry this discussion forward. But if you haven't, to just sit back and armchair quarterback and say they should have put this player in or that player out, I just don't think justifies reducing the model. And so I'd encourage a no vote.
Thank you. Any other member first time? Representative Stiver on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. I believe this is a good thing. A lot of these positions are just analytical positions in the Department of Health.
Any other member for their first time? Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, ladies and gentlemen. So over the course of the last few years, I've had the opportunity to be over in that agency on a fairly regular basis. And I've been working with several of their chief staff officers dealing with the Wyoming Life Resource Center, with disability issues, and also with the COVID issues and the wildlife research and the place and land, along with the state hospital. And I can tell you that this is a dynamic, incredibly hardworking office. And in addition to that, you may recall back in 16 and 17, we made cuts to this office. And then they also came back in because of financial issues that you heard the good representative from Fremont County talk about last year. And where they ended up cutting about $9.5 million, reduce their budget to accommodate us and basically to try to work and to turn into a lean and mean fighting machine. And they really are. And I would ask you to go over and walk through that office and see for it yourself and how hard they work and for what they do. So I really appreciate the work that they do. So on and against.
Any other members? Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I think there's a lot of hardworking, dedicated, talented people who used to work for the state of Wyoming who are no longer working for the state of Wyoming as we got through this budget process over the last year. I don't know what these 12 people do. I don't know how critical they are to the operations of the Department of Health. So I'm going to be a no vote on this amendment. But I feel in my heart that we got played. That this agency had the opportunity to come in and recommend reductions in their full-time employees. They didn't do that. Instead, they recommended massive cuts to programs that are delivered by contractors by and large and deliver services directly to the people of Wyoming. And they knew that we could not let those level of cuts stand. And we would backfill them. And to the great extent we did. And so at the end of the day, this largest department in our state has lost no positions, unlike many of these divisions that we talked about that have lost multiple people. And they got all their budget back, or much of it back, to pay for the contract positions and the contract operations. So I would just ask that the appropriators in the committee do the deep dive next year and really hold this agency's toes to the fire, because other agencies have taken cuts and sent people down the road with pink slips. And this largest agency in our state did not.
Thank you. Other members? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize. I came to the conversation just a few minutes late, but I guess the biggest question that I would have is, number one, are these positions filled? And if so, I have kind of a hard problem with that. We've talked a lot about jobs and protecting Wyoming families and protecting Wyoming jobs. And all of a sudden it seems that state employees' jobs are just like, willy-nilly. Let's just get rid of these guys. Let's get rid of those guys. They're just government employees. These are people in this city that earn a living and pay their dues, and they spend their money in our restaurants and in our retail establishments. They contribute to the economy as well. So if they're not filled, that's a different discussion as well. But I do apologize if I did not hear that when I was walking in from committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for their first time, Amendment 16, third reading? Any other member for their first time? Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I apologize. I've only gotten this half researched, the speed at which, but I did just look in the budget data book that we have available to us online. In the 2011-12 budget, they had 1,417 positions. And in the most recent budget, and I haven't looked at the current, the one for the supplemental, but they had 1,349. So that would be a cut of 67 positions. That seems like a pretty big wad to me.
Any other member for their first time? Member for their first time? Member for their first time, second time? Member for their second time, Representative Larson Lloyd. On the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. I think what I will try to do, Mr. Chairman, I'll stay on the, I think that we do a deeper dive into this agency than perhaps may appear, but fair enough if you don't think we do, but so of their total budget, their 100 series accounts for 11%. And of that 11%, 75% goes out to the state facilities, the various state hospitals and institutions. And the 25% of their 100 is here in Cheyenne. Actually, maybe a little less than that. Administrative. And so then what do you have in Cheyenne? You have your division heads and you have your healthcare financing. I would tell you that 11%, when 90% of your budget is going out to the people, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. And again, given direction and administrative accounts to do that, I think warrants where they're at and would again encourage a no vote on the amendment.
Any other member for their second time? This is second time, third reading amendment 16. Second time to the sponsor, Representative Gray on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this agency asked for an 11% reduction. 11% reduction and a 0.5% reduction in their employees. 11%, 0.5%. If you're reducing 11% of your budget, you should be able to reduce the workforce by more than 0.5%. It's the way a small business works. That's the way a large business works. It's just the way it works. And to say that, well, just because the director wants it this way, that's the way it's going to be, which is basically what the representative from District 54 said. It's not acceptable. It's up to us to make these decisions. And just because the director says that he thinks this is adequate, it's ultimately in our duty to consider each of these points. So I'd urge an aye vote on the amendment.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 16, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Division being requested. All those in favor, please rise. $18, all those opposed? Looks like more than 18. Thank you very much.
And
The
Mr.
amendment has
Speaker,
not been adopted.
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
Please proceed.
And Mr. Speaker, I just want to, we get a long third reading debate ahead of us. I just want to commend the body in advance for that, but I also want to caution the body that when we're summarizing testimony from previous representatives, that we be very cautious when we do that. It's important that if we're going to do that, that we're accurate. And if we're not sure what, the body heard the testimony, so maybe we just kind of leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So I will be, I said it, and I'll try to keep us, let's try to stay on the amendments. I know maybe yesterday or the day before on second reading, I gave a little more latitude. And some folks had concerns about that. So we'll try to stay on the amendments. Representative Gray, do you have something?
Privilege of the floor, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to respond to that. We have a right to respond to the points made. And, that was a point that was made. Did I ask the director? No. But it's not up to him. It's up to this body. And that
Thank
was
you.
the point of the point.
Thank you. I think that was in your testimony as well, in your debate. Thank you. Members, we're on the third reading amendment number 5. Third reading amendment number 5, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I move amendment number 5 to House Bill 1 and present to you a warm fuzzy after our lovely lunch break. For those of you who were here in 2019, you may recall a heartfelt personal plea from a former representative from here in the capital city that brought to you, this body, successfully the needs of those who reside just right outside the doors here. For those who are unaware, food insecurity is a real issue for our constituents. Over 70,000 Wyoming residents face food insecurities each year. Food insecurity means not being able to provide healthy, nutritious food, not having enough to eat, skipping meals to make ends meet, and this can happen occasionally or become a frequent burden to families. While the pandemic certainly compounded the need for food banks in each of our communities, I hope it also opened our eyes and our hearts to the ongoing need to combat food insecurities in our state. There are 158 food banks in our state, on average 7 in each of our counties. They are operated by churches, nonprofits, school districts, higher education providers, and senior centers. This allocation, as proposed, would be a compassionate complement to the First Lady's Hunger Initiative that addresses childhood hunger. This amendment would allow the Department of Health to provide grants to grassroots, boots-on-the-ground organizations that are working in our communities to address food insecurities. It would address unique or emergency needs that may emerge. So I ask us to reflect on our full bellies, why we ran for office, and to really connect with what fuels our desires to serve, and vote in support of this amendment. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Members, for the first time, Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the kind and charitable representative from over the hill here and her intent here to address problems that we know exist in our state. There's a little problem, and it's the same problem that existed when we had the previous one that was passed in the body. Is there's not the mechanism in the Department of Health to do this. And their question back to us was, well, this is in the director's office, or do you want us to draft rules? What does unique and emergent needs mean? You want us to develop kind of this program for $500,000 without much direction. Is it a worthy endeavor? Probably, but I would suggest to the good presenter of the amendment that to work on this and maybe bring it back as a bill moving forward to refine it a little and give a little more direction on how she might see this being, which division within the department that would come under, perhaps public health or some other means of doing that, but to give a little more direction. But I'd encourage on this amendment a no vote. Last time we did pass it out and pulled it out in conference committee just because it was problematic. And so the same problems exist. I think it's the same language, but would encourage a no vote. Compliment her on her effort.
Thank you, members. Any other member for their first time, third reading amendment number 5? Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm in favor of this amendment. I think things have changed from the last time that we heard this amendment when this body passed it out, and that was the pandemic. And I'll tell you, and I would imagine it would be the same for many of you, but at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a food bank. It was a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week little auxiliary food bank. I happened to walk by it, walking my dog every day. And so I decided that every week with my grocery shopping, I would buy extra and bring that bag over. And the first week, I had forgotten something on the bench, right? So I went in on the second day, and every single item that I had purchased was gone. Every single item. I was shocked. I didn't recognize that need, honestly, in a little auxiliary food bank. Another time I went in and there was a mom with a couple of kids, and I looked around and there wasn't a cookie. right? I mean, it just occurred to me that as she was picking up pasta and sauce, that there was nothing special for a kid. And so I made sure I started to pick up cookies, right? Just something extra, something special. I would imagine things like that happened in every one of your communities. But the other thing that I know, so the need is there. So the issue would be, can they administer it? And I will put forth to you that my guess is yes. That the other things that our state agencies have learned is how to respond and respond well. They can do this. So let's just put a little bump out there to help what we know is absolutely needed in our communities. Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, on and against the amendment for one reason, and that is that we're going to have a special session. And this is exactly what some of those CARES Act and COVID dollars are for. And I know that also in the prior COVID dollars, we gave millions of dollars to nonprofits to help do this, and we'll continue to do it. And we'll make sure that that issue comes up, and this body will address that issue. But I just suggest that instead of using general funds, let's just use COVID dollars to do it.
Thank you. Representative Ayer for your first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I applaud the bringer of this amendment. But I have to speak to my own experience in my community. I serve on the board of directors of a local food pantry. And we have had a slight increase in the number of clients that come to the food pantry for relief and for some food. But we have been inundated with donations. Our cash donations are up tremendously since the pandemic began, and our food donations are up. And so our community is taking care of itself, and we don't need to call on the state. I speak against this amendment.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time, second time before the sponsor? Second time to the sponsor, Representative Sherwood.
Mr. Chairman and this body, thank you for your consideration. I want to let you know that I did work with the staff at LSO to add additional language from once you saw this last time. So we do define this as the needs of persons within the community being served. And so it is more specific to make sure that the department can get out these grants to the people who need them most. So our food banks can't use this to buy a refrigerator, but it has to go to direct services. And I am an eternal optimist. And so I believe greatly in our state employees' ability to administer grant funds. If anything, in 2020, everyone had to be an expert in how to get money out efficiently to our communities. So I would ask that you would move forward with this on faith and hope and love and consideration. So thank you.
Thank you. Members, we're voting on third reading, amendment number 6 to House Bill 1. House number 5. So members, we're voting on third reading, amendment number 5 to House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for our consideration is third reading number 6, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do move third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. This is our treatment courts. What this does is restore $793,967, just a little number, to the general fund for treatment courts. And while I appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that this reduction, I believe it's a 10% reduction. It's consistent with the reductions that we've had across the board in our agencies. But I want to plead to the body that this is a $800,000 expenditure that you can put back into the general fund and receive a well return on your investment for your dollars. Basically, these are treatment courts. We're talking about drug courts, DUI courts, veteran courts. And at the end of the day, the way that these courts, primarily what we're looking at is a per participant, per dollar type of scenario. And so what this does is there's only less than 24 applicants in the pool, for example, in my county. And so when you take this cut, what you do is you take anywhere from a fourth to a fifth. Well, so a 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but it results in a fourth to a fifth of the participants not being able to enter the program. Why does that matter? Because of recidivism rates. Drug court graduates' average arrests declined from 4.2% prior program to 0.59 post-program, almost non-existent. DUI courts declined pre-program from 3.68 to, listen to this, 0.24 post-program. So the return rate on the success of our treatment courts is absolutely phenomenal. These are dollars well spent. The alternative is, of course, incarceration. And I know we've discussed those numbers before, so I won't belabor the point, but the incarceration numbers, you're going to see those expenditures on your general fund. If you don't spend a little more here to keep these programs moving. Again, these are veteran courts. Their graduate average arrest rates declined from 2.93% prior program to 0.07 post-program arrests. So these, I mean, folks, I can't plead with you enough. These dollars are very well spent. And so I would ask for your favorable consideration on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. On the amendment, Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My good desk mate points out very well the statistics on the importance of drug court. We're glad that we're able to fund it at the level we do. This was a step 2 reduction. Their budget being $7.5 million. They take a 10% step 2 reduction, none in a step 3, which leaves them with $6.5 million still in for that important services provided and helps divert particularly youth, but adults as well, from coming back into the system. Heard testimony from the department as well. I reached out to in my community to see how they impacted it. I think the response I got is we understand the position of the state, and do we like it? No. Can we live with it? Yes. And so that's I would just recommend a no vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Brown, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I thank my my capital city partner here in crime when it comes to these. You know, that's what we're talking about, right? A little bit of crime that we spend a little bit of money on here and do a little bit of rehabilitation as opposed to sending these people to jail. We can either pay now and severely reduce our impacts later. You look at a DUI court, just a DUI court alone. I've got some statistics here that you're looking at $6,300 for a week of incarceration. Doesn't take long to pull in these the amount of DUIs that we have here in this state. I feel like we can pony this up. I don't. We just put 55 million back in the other day. I think we can afford 600,000.
Thank you. I have the member for the first time, Representative Kinner, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I would certainly urge caution here. I'm on it against the amendment. Certainly worthy causes and certainly agree with all that. And but we have made sure that there's considerable money left in there after the cuts, $6.5 million, which when we analyzed that, we felt like they could continue to do their good work. And just a reminder that we'll be back together in about a year and we'll be able to take a look at it. So let's resist this increase in the general fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? We're on first time, third reading amendment number 6. First time and second time. Second time to the sponsor, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just real quick, body. And I appreciate your patience with this amendment. You know, $700,000 into the general fund and the savings is astronomical. Yes, there's some money left in this program. I understand that. But this is actually, when you think about the 10% cut and apply it to the number of participants, I hate to say it, but it's a little more draconian. The drug court program will have to reduce its population by 4 participants and deny 12 applicants. The DOI program will also have to reduce its population by 6 and deny 6 applicants. So, you know, and that's just in my county alone. For example, what it does in your individual counties, multiply that number across. At the end of the day, $700,000 to your general fund, and you're going to save a tremendous amount. So really just appreciate your support on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. So members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Chairman Nicholas, would you step up to the mic there? Maybe you can just tell everybody what you're passing out so that we can get that done. And then you can finish it out, because it is important to our work, but please,
Yeah,
please proceed.
privilege of the floor, Your Honor. Mr. Speaker. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm distributing is a budget amendment, number 27, and it comes up in about 2 bills, and it distributes the OFSTA account. So that's why I'm walking around. I don't mean to be too disruptive. So thank you.
So members, in accordance with the joint rules, the chairman of appropriations does not have the same limitations for the providing of amendments. So as long as we're within the component of the budget is still within our consideration, the chairman of appropriations can offer amendments. And that is in the joint rules 14. Anyway, I had it at one point. Next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 7. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 7 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, Wednesday, we heard sort of a preliminary version of this amendment, and this is the new and improved version. There was discussion of the severe, if I can use that word, cuts to behavioral health. So the programs that we're looking at are recovery, outpatient substance abuse, outpatient mental health, residential mental health, and residential substance abuse. If you remember, I got up to the mic and I said, actually, what about outpatient mental health? Because that wasn't on the amendment. And if you think about it, this is another one of those areas where we could be, you know, what I refer to the old phrase, penny wise and pound foolish. When we make cuts, for example, the step 3 cut in outpatient mental health services is nearly 20% in the step 3. 20% cut to outpatient mental health is pretty significant. And the challenges of having people in our community who, if they get case management and medication supervision, can probably stay in the community, maybe even work, versus cut their services. Maybe they don't get seen for a month or something, you know, could end up in the state hospital. Obviously, it's pretty obvious. And I think we all understand that some of these caring for people in community is a much cheaper way of providing services than caring for people later. So the amendment that I have brought back today, because that amendment didn't pass, this amendment has a cost of $673,000 less than the previous amendment. And what I did was I added in the units at half of the step 3 cuts. So there are still cuts to all the units, but I'm adding half back. And the same goes for on the second page of the amendment. And I won't speak too much to this because you heard the presentation on Wednesday. There was also child support and split sentencing. Both of those amounts had been added in at the full amount. And again, I'm adding them in at half. So what I'm adding is for half back of the step 3 cuts for mental health and substance abuse in the community and residential, and for the child support and split sentencing. And Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to take questions.
Thank you. Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, I would move to divide the amendment with Division 1 being page 2, lines 24 to 38, and Division 2 being everything else.
Just to clarify for the chairman and the body, Division 1 is which?
Is on page 2, lines 24 through 38. So toward the end of the amendment is Division
Okay.
1, just because I would like to talk about it first.
Chair rules it is divisible. Which would you like to start with, Representative Stiff?
Mr. Speaker, Division 1.
Division 1, so members, this is lines 24 through basically the rest of the amendment. Division 1, Representative Stiff, for your first time, Division 1.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So this Division 1, which is toward the end of the amendment on the second page, deals with funding for split sentencing in our department that handles our corrections. So split sentencing is when you get sentenced to a felony. So you've been convicted of a felony. Normally you would go to the state prison, right? But you make a deal and say, look, the sentence is only gonna be 3 months and we'll serve that in the county jail. So the sentence is split, but the department of our correctional department is obligated to pay for it, right? So on and against this division, for the simple reason that our director of the department says that he doesn't need the money, that there's plenty of money in the current fund to fund this function throughout the biennium. So we just don't need it. So
Any other
on and
member for their
against.
first time? Any other member for their first time? This is Division 1, third reading, amendment number 7. If you want to speak to it, go to the microphone, please. Any other member? Representative Sweeney, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So trying to track second reading amendment into the third reading, my question is there any portions that are included in the third reading to the second reading? I can't track it that quick. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
I think if it's a technical question about it, the chairman will just say that there doesn't seem to be any interaction with the second reading amendment with this third reading amendment, unless our LSO staff may have missed something, but that'll be addressed. That can be addressed later. So we'll just leave that alone, and we'll go any other member on Division 1, third reading amendment number 7. Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a really good program. And so I just want to make sure I've got sort of like that blood oath that this is not going to diminish the effectiveness of the program if I vote against the amendment.
I am not sure that we take blood oaths on the floor, but we're still on first time. Representative Conley, for your first time,
Thank you,
Division
Mr.
1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want that blood oath. And honestly, this program is so good, it should be expanded, right? This is a program that keeps people out of prison and back in their communities. That's what the split is about. We should be doing it as much as possible, not diminishing it. So on and against this amendment or this division.
Thank you. Any other members? Any other members? First time, Division 1. Any other members? First time, Division 1. First time, Division 1. Second time, Division 1. To the sponsor, Representative Stiff of the Division 1.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the comments from the representative from District 13, I would say that under the split sentencing program, you're still incarcerated. It's just what hotel you're staying at, right? Are you staying at the state hotel? Or are you staying at the county hotel? All right. And because the state is obligated to pay for it. That's what the program monies are used for. So it's a good program, yes, but it's plenty funded. As far as for the representative from District 27, I would say strength and honor. Are you not entertained?
I'm not sure about this. But I know where we are in the process. We are voting on third reading, amendment number 7, Division 1 to House Bill 1, which is lines 24 through the remainder of the amendment on page 2. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. That division has not been adopted. We're on to Division 2.
Members, with respect to Division 2, I would just say this is the department that handles our health. Obviously, these are all good programs. One thing you might consider is when you look at the fiscal profile, the one that came out most recently, if you look on page 3, line 36 of that profile, you'll see that our base budget gave us about $17 million of available funds to spend this session with amendments. And if you look in the next column, it says as of today, we have $0 left because we've already spent $17 million. So think about that when you're thinking about voting for another 7.9. Thank you.
Thank you. So members, we are on third reading amendment number 7, Division 2, which is page 1 of the amendment through page line 24 on page 2. Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On in support of this division. I really believe in the funding for mental health programs, and ultimately, if we'll know more about where our budget shakes out in by next January, and really what programs we're really going to have to take a hard look at. But I think right now, I want the benefit of the doubt on this, and I really want to keep these in. And as it relates to what that bottom line is, you're going to see a budget amendment that comes along from the good committee number 2 that will be a balanced budget, a budget balancer. We have money in the OPSTA account. We have money in the LISRA. I really would like to see these programs stay. They are so important in our local communities, and really from keeping the people from becoming Title 25, incarcerated when they come out of incarceration. It's incredibly important that we have these mental health services. And so on in support of this division.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? And Chairman Wilson, since you did not divide this, you can go for a first time on this division if you'd like to. Any other members for their first time? Any members for their first time? For their second time, Chairman Wilson, did you want to speak to your first time on this? Please proceed.
I'm losing track of the times there, but members, I would just say, right, there it is 7 million-ish. But there's a famous playwright who had a line about, for the want of a nail, the horseshoe was lost, and for the want of the horseshoe, the battle was lost. If we fail to take care of needs in the cheap $7 million way now, 4 or 5 years down the road, these people's problems could balloon significantly. And, when you come back a couple terms from now and you wonder, why are we spending $20 million on residential or hospitalized mental health and substance abuse patients when we could have spent a lot less and kept these folks at home? I think that would be a wise investment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any members for their second time? To the sponsor, Representative Stith. To the divider, Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, folks, just vote your conscience. Thank you.
Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 7, House Bill 1, Division 2. Division 2. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. As a rule, the chairman gets to rule. The division has failed, but division being called, all those in favor, please rise. All those opposed, and we're going to do the count because there are people off the floor. And just to remind members, this is not a majority of the members elected. This is a majority of the members that vote. The division has not been adopted, 2432. So for clarity, for those that may be participating from elsewhere and listening in, third reading amendment number 7, both divisions have not been adopted. Privilege of the floor, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, there's one more amendment, which is a balance. It's a corrective technical amendment. It's on the back. So if you're getting up and moving around, it'll come up in about 5 bills. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 8. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 8 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, what this amendment does is puts $325,000 into the Office of State Lands for the purpose of doing all of the administrative work for land exchanges. Currently in the mountains west of us here, there are numerous stranded assets, stranded parcels of state land, which can be swapped for federal land in a way that the remaining state lands, and the state would accumulate quite a large portion of land, can be logged, they can be mined, they can be utilized, which currently they can't. And the agency that handles all of those federal lands is not really interested in logging them. Those mountains in the past, and some of you may remember, we had a program where we put state employees in with federal employees and actually harvested the timber. Those actually paid money to the state. After all the costs were deducted, we actually made money on those programs and that. So that's the idea with this. Additionally, if we can swap or sell what's known as the, excuse me, I forget the name of the parcel that is up in the northwest corner of the state. The previous parcel sold for 42 million, but if we can swap it, I know we're looking at potentially swapping one section for about 11,000 acres of really land that provides access for people. The state provides some minerals and some other things. And in this day and age, I think that's a worthwhile exchange. So with that, I'd ask for your favorable vote.
Thank you. Representative Larson, first time on the amendment 3008.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling with this amendment. I'm a no vote on it because as I read it, it's really directed towards 2 national forests. The testimony we just heard said to the mountains west of here, all mountains are west of here. And so then as I read the amendment, it's really to 2. And so if it's just the 2, I'm wondering if it isn't, and we know the one up in the far north west portion is in a national park is one, but I'm not understanding what the one directed down here next to our state line to the state south of us is for. And if there's partials throughout the state, why this wouldn't be directed statewide. And the reason is because this agency already has funds and a budget in their state lands division to address appraisals. The fact they have an appraisal division to address land exchanges or land sales or land purchases. And so I'm a little suspicious of why we're doing that and would encourage a no vote.
Thank you. Any other member? Third reading amendment number 8 on the amendment. Representative Clausen.
Just a question for the bringer of the bill. So we did an interim study about the stranded assets, and it's super rare to actually get a land trade with the federal government. I was wondering if there've been some headway or what this, if actually doable.
So members, this front mic, you actually have to stay fairly close to it to get it to transmit. I don't know if other people have trouble hearing when people at this front mic, but just pay attention to that. You kind of start leaning back when you get close to the end and it kind of dies out on it. So Resident Clausen, you will certainly get a second chance if you want to add to that. But I just want to be clear that you start backing away from it. I just finish your first time on that because the last part you started backing away. If you want to go a second time, that's fine. But I don't think did members of the body understand what was said. We couldn't at the podium. I can tell you that. So Representative Clausen, if you'd like to finish your first time or restate your first time, I want to give you that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me now? Too tall. To the bringer of the bill, or to the bringer of the amendment, we did an interim study on these federal lands exchanges several years ago, and it was virtually impossible to get one of these done. I was just wondering if there was headway, one that was ready, because it was a major process at the time.
Thank you, Representative. Any other members for their first time? First time, Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to vote no, just because that word Teton National Park was in there, and I just don't want to trade pure gold for trees. And I just think what we own there is an asset that I think is unbelievable. And there will come a time to transfer that, but it's got to be for an unbelievable benefit to our state and the school children in perpetuity. So I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you for not dividing that. Any other members for their first time? Representative Schwartz, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't expound, but I will agree with the chairman who just spoke, and please vote no.
Any other member for their first time? First time. Representative Ottman, first time on the amendment.
Yes, I was just wondering for some clarity with a land swap, how it would affect mining and timber. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members for their first time? Third reading amendment number 8. First time, second time. Second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to belay it, but there are mountains to the north of us. So the other thing is, to answer the question, yes, there's been some headway on some of the parcels in the mountains that are kind of west of here and border the other state, in that this would consolidate state lands, because we have stranded assets of quarter sections here, oddball sections there. And it's just to provide additional money for the NEPA studies that will be needed and that sort of thing. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd call for the vote.
Thank you, members. We are voting on third reading amendment number 8, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Let's try this again. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The chair rules it is not adopted. Next amendment is third reading of number 26. And members, just so you know, I've got different colored copies up here. Copies are being distributed, so we're trying to make sure they get in the order. So there's about 4 in a row, 6 here amendments, and we got some insertions. So third reading amendment number 6, Representative Nicholas, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, what this amendment does, this allows, and first of all, what you have to understand, there's no money involved in this. This is just authorization. And it's an authorization for the University of Wyoming to use their bonding capacity and then refinance their current loan with the Bison Run apartment complex that's adjacent to UW. By doing this, because of the low interest rates, they will be able to save $400,000 a year as they acquire these properties. These apartments were built on a PPP program, so they use private partnership. And so they're basically acquiring this now, or they're buying it from the developer over time, using the revenues from the rents of the apartments. This allows them to save $400,000 a year. we have a statute that in order for them to do this, they has to have authorized, has to be authorized by the legislature. That's how we prevent them from just going out willy-nilly and building a bunch of buildings without our consent, and then having us be responsible at some point potentially for those costs. So normally this would be in a CapCon bill that was here earlier, but they just brought this to us yesterday. And so that we don't have the opportunity to put it in the CapCon bill, so that's why it's here. So I'd ask for your aye vote, please. And
Discussion
I
on the
would
amendment.
move third reading amendment number 26 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a couple of questions for the bringer of the amendment. And in particular, who owns the Bison Run Apartments right now? I just pulled them up and it is under UW, but I am curious about any loss in property tax revenue to the city or anything along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gray for your first time. Representative Simpson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For a couple questions also, where are these facilities located in relationship to the campus? And how did this tie into the need to replace the Crane and Hill dormitories? Are they just going to replace them or add additional housing for our students?
Any other member for their first time? We're on first time, third reading amendment number 26. Representative Gray for your first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First for a second.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Members for their first time? Members for their first time, second time before the sponsor. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I got a couple of questions. For one, I mean, usually the rule why the chairman of appropriation is able to bring these amendments while we're in mid-reading is for balancers. I mean, I just trying to understand the nexus of this. I know he said it came yesterday, but what's the nexus of this? And I would like it one more time what the other funds are, because why is this not in every single CapCon bill or budget, this sort of structure? Because I would think the university has done this multiple times, and I haven't seen this that many times in a bill. So I really would like a little more background on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for their second time? We're second time before the sponsor. Second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Chairman Nicholas on the amendment.
Thank you. And I appreciate the question. So the Bison Run Apartments were built in 2011, and they were built by American Campus Communities, which is an LLC. It was a private venture. And then but it was partially financed by $15.3 million in bonds that they helped secure the process. And so what this allows, and they have an option on this property. If they go out and they purchase it outright, then they, as part of the contract, they have the right to go in early and purchase the contract by using their bond dollars. If you take the amount of the bonds that they originally got, if they can go out, refinance and get new bonds, then they can acquire these properties and save $400,000 a year. So that's, I hope, and these are located, if you're going over to the University of Wyoming, where the parking areas are adjacent to the field house, and there's the paved parking lot, and then there's kind of a dirt parking lot going to the east. These are the housing development that are on the far side of that dirt parking lot. So that's where they're located. And they're located on university property, and they house UW students. And that's what they are. So I hope that answers those questions. Thank you.
So members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 26, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. And this will require a roll call vote. So if it's close, we may just go to the roll. So it is 31. So we will just proceed to a roll call vote on third reading amendment number 26. Thank you, members.
Andrew. Baker. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Wharf. Excused. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Andrew, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 32 aye, 27 no, 1 excused.
Third reading amendment number 26 has been adopted. Next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 17. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 17 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the first time that I've ever brought a bill that, or an amendment that failed on second reading to third. And I do that because I feel so strongly about this. I sent all of you an email a while ago that indicated that the market for hydrogen is $700 billion. That's the market. That's not the whole industry. The industry is much larger. And actually last night I was reading a technical publication, and there's a power plant in the state west of us that is being converted from coal to natural gas. But while they're doing that, they're also putting in everything they need now to convert that plant to hydrogen power in the future. That's how big of a market this is. And that's how big of it, to me, a deal it is for Wyoming. And we either get in on this now, or years from now, we'll be looking back saying, why didn't we? So the biggest difference with this is that it is the source of funding. Source of funding for this is water account 1. There's currently $9.1 million in there that sits, does nothing, doesn't collect interest, and just sits and waits until it's backfilled with the under the cap money, as we discussed in a previous bill. Hydrogen, that's how you produce it, is from water. You break down water, you get hydrogen and oxygen, and you recombine them and you produce power. One of the interesting things is that when you do that on a hydrogen fuel cell, you get water as a byproduct, which, and I would use the example of an irrigation system. You can run an irrigation system on a hydrogen fuel cell, and kind of your exhaust is water, which you go right back into the irrigation system. It's not a perpetual motion machine. You do lose some energy and heat and that sort of thing. Hydrogen fuel cells are what's going to power our vehicles in the future. It won't be battery power, I don't think. It'll be fuel cells, because you can store the hydrogen a lot easier than you can store batteries. A lot lighter, a lot more efficient. So with that, I would ask for your favorable consideration. I'm not gonna beat up tremendously on this issue. I know all of us want to get out of here at a reasonable time today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand back and listen to the discussion from first timers.
Thank you. Representative Simpson, for your first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're killing me, Chairman. You're killing me. That little subtle S1 means the water account number 1. I love the concept and everything about it, but let's please find another location to rob money from besides water account 1. We've already done it once today. I recommend you vote no on this amendment.
Any other member? Chairman Eklund, first time on the amendment.
So I would urge a no vote on this. Again, we're going to Water Development Account 1 for more money. It's money that just sits around. Well, the money sits there until it's used. And I guess if there was something in here that assured me that when we make all of this money off of the money we're going to make on hydrogen, that it would flow right back into that account. But I'm not sure that says that in the bill. So please vote no. We do need to develop water.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time, third reading amendment number 17. First time, second time to the sponsor, Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Any unused funds do revert to the Water 1 account. That's just the way it's written. I really don't think that all this money will be spent in the next year and a half. So with that, I would just ask for the vote.
Thank you. Members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 17, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for your consideration is third reading amendment number 9, Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring before you, I will move third reading amendment number 9 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. So members, this is similar to the last one from second reading, except I made a couple changes to help make it more palatable for the body. So it's still SIPA. We've changed the 10 million to 4 million, and we've made it a 2-to-1 match instead of a 1-to-1 match. So we'll still get twice. We'll get 2 times the return on our money immediately off the bat. Because, you know, when we had this plan, we had enough to know that we were going to get 10 millions in donation and have that match. And so now we'll get 2-to-1 match. So on lines 15 through 18, we direct the first 4 million to go back into SIPA. So we will make sure that no matter what, we will get our SIPA money back. And then it'll continue to be used to support the blockchain programs and activities at the university and community colleges around the state. So in the future, if we do want to, if this, goes flying, and we do want to redirect where these funds goes, we can do that in the future. But this, at the very least, at the first year that we can do this in the supplemental budget, we'll just make sure that we'll get our return on our money back. And I won't go back into explaining staking pools again. I'm happy to sit one-on-one with anyone who would like to hear about it. But I do ask for your favorable consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. For your first time, Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. There are elements of cryptocurrencies that are truly the Wild West and highly speculative and frankly worthless. This amendment is not talking about that world. When I started my career in public accounting, I was part of an audit team that was on the front line of extracting data housed in computerized, centralized accounting systems. While small business at that time was still accounting with pencil and paper, global corporations were into a new technology, mainframe centralized computers. As auditors, we statistically sampled the data stored in large disks attached to the mainframes. Data mining went like this. We had a large stack of punch cards and we ran through a card reader that randomly selected transactions from the database. It was the frontier of a new exciting technology, circa 1975. While today, small business has caught up in the use of centralized computer systems, and everyone here understands that because you're staring at your computer right now. The global economy is transitioning to a new technology, moving part of their operations from centralized accounting systems to decentralized. It's called the blockchain. In the blockchain world, a digital asset does what we did with a deck of punch cards. Digital tokens power decentralized protocols for indexing and querying data from various blockchains. This is just one example from my own world of the emerging uses of cryptocurrencies in the blockchain space. This body, through the work of the new generation of legislators in the last few years, has established the legal framework for blockchain. This amendment is a nice corollary to that legal work. It supports the work of blockchain innovators. This space of innovation has the potential to create a dynamic ecosystem in a university setting, drawing the brightest and best entrepreneurs and academics in this new Wyoming blockchain world. So I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members first time? Representative Olson, first time on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for this amendment. And I just want to say that this amendment is a product of trying to respond to this body, listening to you on second reading and trying to figure out what works on third reading. The good bringer of the amendment really honed in on this, but I want to touch on the response to the body. The original amendment was 10 million SIPA dollars. As I indicated then, and I'll reiterate now, if you pass your House Capcom bill as is, you leave 4.2 million in the SIPA. So we've dropped this down to 4 million SIPA dollars, already appropriated dollars, no additional dollars out of your general fund. And then this is now a 2-to-1 match from the university or private funds. And just that last piece there, which is really important, that we're going to obligate that the dividends go back to repay the investment. I think that's good for the state. This is obviously not just good for the university. I think it's good for the state, as the last speaker really highlighted on the importance of what we're doing here. And I really appreciate that. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, on and for the amendment.
Thank you. Representative Duncan on the amendment, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind everybody, like I said last time, we need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to show the rest of the international world, as well as all the nation and our state, that we are putting blockchain, we are putting cryptocurrency, we are putting all of our laws and everything else out there that we have been working so hard to do, that we are actually backing what we say that we are doing. We're actually backing it with our investment. So on and for the amendment.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? Members for their first time? Members for their first time, second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor. Members, we are voting on third reading, amendment number 9, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Let's just call the roll. Please, Chief Clerk.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza. Paxton, would you confirm? Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf excused, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker.
Aye.
Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 36 aye, 23 no, 1 excused.
Third reading amendment number 9 has been adopted. Next amendment for your consideration is third reading amendment number 10. Representative Simpson, I believe. Representative Simpson.
Mr. Speaker, I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 10.
Thank you, Representative Simpson. Thank you, Representative Simpson. Next amendment for your consideration is third reading amendment number 23.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move third reading amendment number 23 and ask for your favorable consideration. So, ladies and gentlemen, every year, whenever we do the budget, there's always a budget balancer. And so all this does is protect the funds. We don't anticipate that we need it, but in case for some reason, if there's some type of a revenue issue at the end of the year, this just covers the actions of the respective bodies on the bills and the budget amendments that we enact in this session. So that's all this does. And basically what it does, we take the LSRA and we use it as a backstop to backfill the statutory reserve amount, which we always keep in our budget, basically in our checkbook or in the bank account. And that's 5% of the general funds that's collected through the year. This year, it's $113 million. So this just identifies LSRA rainy day fund dollars to cover if there's any shortfall so that we have to use part of the statutory reserve amount. So that's really all this does. And so, like I say, the LSO and the budget folks do not believe that we're going to need this. But it's basically cover for in case some unexpected thing happens, if we pass, and so that's what this does. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any members for your first time? Chairman Zwanzer.
Thanks. I just need a little more explanation. So our statutory reserve, I thought, was our backstop. So now we're asking to have a backstop to the backstop. And if you could just elaborate on that a bit more at the end.
Any other members? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so the 113,000, the statutory reserve amount is that 113 million. If we go over on what we have available in our general fund, that it starts dipping in, that the next dip we go into is the statutory reserve amount, that 113. If we go into that, it will backfill out of the LSRA. So the intent of that is to keep the statutory reserve amount full so that we can, moving forward, for unanticipated expenses for general fund for moving forward, they can do that.
Any other members for the first time? First time Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is there ever a time that we haven't done this? I'm just curious because during the COVID year, I was trying to get a complete answer when LISRA if LISRA was the complete backstop to the general fund. And depending on how I asked the question, I tended to get a different answer. So I just want to know, has it always been this way? Is there never ever a time that it hasn't been done this way? Thank you.
Okay, any other members for the first time? Members for the second time? Second time before the sponsor, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So on one occasion in the last 25 years, is my understanding, and it was 2016 when we had the large plummet. We actually we used up the budget reserve amount as part of to cover the shortfall at that time. That's the only time in 25 years that we have that we haven't kept a budget reserve account in our checkbook. And really, the primary reason for this is for cash flow, because we need to have cash available. As you recall, at the beginning of the year, July 1, we pay everybody else out first. And if we haven't had sufficient revenues to build up on our collection of taxes and other revenues, severance taxes, et cetera, then we can have a cash flow problem. And so this really protects us from that. But it's, like I say, it's not anticipated. We don't, and in fact, we'll have, as we talked about earlier, we're going to have more than sufficient funds, we believe. But this is just a precautionary measure in case it's ever needed. So please support it.
Okay, members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 23 to House Bill 1. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? That amendment has been adopted and does not require a roll call vote. Members, the next amendment for our consideration is amendment number 18. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr.
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, move third reading amendment number 18, House Bill 1. Members, this was a 31-29 vote. That's why I brought it back. I mean, if it had been a 40-20 deal, I wouldn't have talked, but I wanted to this is really this account that nobody ever sees, that 10 million right out of SIPA goes into. It's going to be 30 million in there, the penitentiary savings account for sometime 20 years from now in the future. And if we don't pass this, we're going to pull this 30 million out of the LSRA. And I'm just trying to use today's investment dollars for today's people. That's the argument. So thank you. And I think we all know the issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other members for the first time? Yeah, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Just a quick question. I'm kind of considering this because of what the former speaker had just said here. But my question is this account interest bearing right now? And if so, what's our return? Because I didn't grab my data book here. So if I could get some clarification on that, that'll help me vote.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to speak in favor of this amendment again. And I really think when we did this in 2017, I went back a little further in legislative history. It was just too aggressive. And I think the other thing too is that if we're presupposing that this building isn't going to last anywhere near its useful life, we need to be looking at whether there's some contractor liability here, and presupposing as basically we have from the start that the state's just going to have to build another building rather than the fact that the building, we need to be recompensed to some extent for the flaws in the building. I think that's putting the cart before the horse. And this distribution, that notwithstanding, has always been too aggressive. So I think this diverts some funds to make it easier for us to backfill our deficits. And in turn, that allows us to stop this tax increase narrative, which I think is very damaging for our state. And we had that constitutional amendment, which was 20 million. I mean, this is half of that. I mean, and so, I mean, it's just a substantial amount of money. And I think this tax increase there, I'm against it. And so it's going to have to be a mixture of diversions of existing flows and reductions. If we did both of those, I'm pretty confident we could hit, 400 to 500 million and combine that with some recovery in oil, gas, and coal. I think we'll meet the escalator if we control some of that as well. So I think we could do this, but this is the sort of approach that I think is fiscally responsible. So I really urge an aye vote on this. Thank you.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. To answer the question just raised on contractor liability in that, I believe in all the good attorneys in here can correct me if I'm wrong with the statement. It's referred to as statute of repose, not statute of limitations, and that has expired on this building quite a while ago. I know people would like satisfaction on the original building. Frankly, we need to just get on with things. I know that the Attorney General looked through 111 boxes of records and cannot find a signature that says somebody did something wrong. So I think that's outside the scope of this anyway. So I won't belabor the point. We discussed it yesterday. One thing I will tell you, a while ago, I had a meeting with a number of the employees at our good state penitentiary. And one thing they said was, and this was about the time we were doing some of the repairs, is that if the state didn't do something, they had no hope. And that kind of strikes at you when an employee says, I have no hope for the future. And that, so putting this money away gives them hope, knows that the 400 people in the local community there will be employed in the future, that they know that this facility will stay there and that someday we'll have to build a new one. I mean, we've built a number of new buildings, new office building in Casper to replace some of the rentals and that sort of thing. So with that, I'd ask for your no vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Any other members for the first time? Any other members? Any members for the second time? Any members second time for the sponsor? Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just that one question. I think it's invested in Pool A, like Tobacco Trust Fund and Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Funds. It's Craig plus dividends and interest. Thank you.
Members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 18 to House Bill 1. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. That amendment has failed. Division being called. All of those in favor, please stand still. This is our $30. Okay. Okay, folks, all those opposed, please stand. Wendy, I'm a no. Amendment has been adopted, 30 to 29. Members, the next amendment for our consideration is a technical amendment. Third reading amendment number 25 to House Bill 1. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. I would move third reading amendment number 25 and ask for your favorable consideration and your aye vote. So ladies and gentlemen, these are just technical grammatical changes that that our LSO has caught as we've kind of gone through this process. So, so if it just does three things. It on the page 47, line 4, all it does is underline the 2. They just put in an underline. Page 53, line 17, it just corrects the possessive. So that's all it does. And the biggest one down there at the bottom, all that does is correct the language for the general fund swap for the SIPA that we used on the major maintenance. And they're doing this for the auditing staff. So all it is a technical correction on all three. So I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Any other members for the first time? Members for the first time? Anybody for second time before the sponsor? Seeing none. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 25 to House Bill 1, please say aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 27 to House Bill 1. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. I would move third reading amendment number 27 and ask for your favorable consideration, ladies and gentlemen. This is the amendment that I passed out about an hour or so ago. And you recall this, we talked about, we have an account that we capture the 1% severance, which is called the OFSTA account. And this OFSTA account has $168 million on it, or will have by the end of the biennium. So the question is, what do we just held these dollars basically in abeyance to figure out what type of issues, fiscal issues we were going to have through this supplemental budget. We now know that we were going to have a balanced budget. And we know that because of the price of oil, there's an extra $52 million that is currently in our bank accounts that was not there or anticipated to be there when the January CREG was passed. So we don't have the same really concern so much about just having $168 million sitting around in a bank account earning minimum interest. And also, the other reason that this bill is coming out is because of actions taken by our friends down the hall. So this gives us a position when we go to conference committee. So if you look at what it does, it takes 1/2 of the OFSTA, 50%, and it puts it in the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund Reserve account. By doing that, we still have access to it, but if we choose to, then at some point, we'll let it tip into the permanent fund. We take the other half and we put it into the Common Schools Reserve account, meaning that if we need it to help fund education, for some reason, the dollars will be there, they'll be available to us. And if we deposit it into the permanent fund, then it's just there and we don't have access to address our fiscal crisis over the next 2 years, depending on what happens with House Bill 173 and the Senate's amendment, that's bill that's coming down this way. So it's going 50-50. So roughly 80 some odd million into each of the 2 reserve accounts. So be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Floor Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, thank you. On and against the amendment. This is very similar to an amendment we saw on second reading, which is the beginning of a policy choice that we're all going to probably have to make at some point about whether we want to put the 1% severance towards the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund or whether we're going to put it in these reserve accounts or where it should go. And I think right now our biggest hole is, frankly, is in the school side. And if we're going to move that severance tax, I'd rather we moved it there rather than into 2 other buckets. And so, I appreciate the bringer and I appreciate what they're trying to do. I just fundamentally don't believe in the policy. So on and against the amendment.
Any other members for the first time? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is a little bit similar, although I take a little bit of a different approach to it. I think we should be distributing this into either LISRA or the Legislative Deficit Control Account, which is a sub-account of LISRA. The point is, I think LISRA is that's a great account because it allows us to backfill the deficits that we have. And it's our main weapon we have to try to address the deficit. and to pair diversions from LISRA or the legislative deficit control account with reductions. That I think should be the approach. And what the ratio is, dollar for dollar, $1 for $1.50. I mean, that's the discussion I think we should be having and the answer to our fiscal woes. And I'm concerned about this because you divert it to those two accounts that, you know, you start getting distributions into SIPA, you start getting distributions in the general fund, and especially the reserve account, and it can get diverted in different ways to things that aren't necessarily our core structural deficit problems. So I'm going to vote no on this, I think, and unless my concerns are addressed, and I think we need to divert into LISRA, and that allows us to combine, have this discussion. Let's remove the tax discussion because that's the wrong way to go, and talk about combining diversions, putting all our eggs in that basket, diversions from that account with reductions. And that gets us to where we want to be in terms of the discussion I've been hoping to have for 5 years now. And it's frustrating a little bit because it's very difficult to frame the discussion that way. But hopefully voting no on this, eventually we will be able to. So that's my approach. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the previous speaker, I completely agree with him on the LISRA. I was glaring at him a few comments ago. Now I'm smiling at him because I agree with him that, you know, on the importance of the LISRA, and I hope we'll remember that when we come to a bill on Monday. I just want to remind the body that in the previous two bienniums, we've diverted this statutory 1%. It's by statutory, we put it into the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund corpus. The last two bienniums, and we've done this historically when we've needed to, we take that money to use for expenditures of government. Last two bienniums, we've used all of that. This year, with the changes we've made in the budget, we're going to go through this budget session. We had planned on and just was nervous not to put this 1% in the corpus again and have it liquid. So we created this account we call OPSTA just for this fund for this biennium, and we're not going to use it. Okay. Now we've got a couple of options. We can leave it liquid in case something goes to heck in a handbasket here in the next 2 years. But we feel confident with the changes we've made in our budget that we can do this. So then what are we going to do with this money? We can leave it liquid. We could put it in one account. This amendment will take half of it and address the concerns that the good floor leader has, in my opinion, or at least send it to the direction of his concern, which is the reserve account for the common school permanent mineral fund, and half to the PMTF, the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. Some would like it to all go one, and some would like it to go all the other. We're taking the approach of dividing the baby and splitting it and attacking it both ways. So would encourage an aye vote on this.
Speaker Pro Tem Greer, and we'll go to Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you. So I do have a question on this, and I, you know, these funds by statute will stay in the 1% severance sales tax account. Okay. So my question is, as I read the amendment, though, it says as soon after the fiscal year, how can we direct funds after the end of the fiscal year in this budget? I'm just trying to understand structurally how you can make that happen. And I would need to understand that before I could have a clear vote.
Thank you. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Strongly in favor. And I guess I just want to make sure we all understand the policy choice and the optics. So roughly 120 million, right? And so you look at the front of what we're doing, April 1st, 2021, next month, right? So half of this, $60 million. You have a choice in this amendment. Take that 60 million, you could put 30 million in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund and 30 million in the LSRA. So you're going to go back to your constituents and you're going to say, yeah, we cut jobs, we cut healthcare, we didn't do that much for the elderly and disabled, but feel better, we put $30 million into a permanent inviolate account. And then you're going to go back and you're going to say, well, we cut all these things, but don't worry, we added $30 million more into the LSRA. because it's not quite raining yet, even though we're cutting jobs and creating havoc and we still have level 3 cuts ahead of us. Don't worry, we put 60 million into savings. Why, right? What this amendment does is saying we're not dumping, at least for April 1st, 2021, we just get to hold it for another year, right? So we're going to put it currently in the reserve account, which we can come back next year. And if things get great, we can put it in savings. But if things aren't so great, we can use it. And it's saying we can put in the permanent reserve account for school funds. So if things go great in the next year, we can put it in savings. But if not, we can use it. I cannot go back to my constituency and say, hey, I cut some more state jobs and community college jobs and health contracts across the state. But don't you worry, I put 60 million in violet funds at the interest at whatever we're going to get the next year will help the future generations in 30 or 40 years. And I would certainly love to come back next year and say that, assuming our budget is solid. But I'm not going to lock away $60 million on April 1st, 2021, when we still have a year to see what happens in the post-COVID world, hopefully the post-COVID world. And that's what this amendment does, is say, stay liquid. We don't know what's happening, but before you lock up funds, stay liquid for a year, and we can have this conversation in the budget session where it truly does belong next year.
Thank you. Representative Hallinan, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hate to take up the body's time just to say that I agree completely with the previous speaker, but I do. And the main issue we have here is, do we want to put this money, this half of the 1% or 1% savings, do we want to put that into an inviolate account and lock it away so we can't get at it? Or do we want to keep it liquid? That's the simple problem that we're dealing with. And I think we need to go ahead and keep this money available for our use. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Any other member? First time. First time. I see people moving, not toward the mic. First time. First time, second time. Representative Summers for your second time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So I'm going to back up and go back on my position. I don't like where this is going, and I fundamentally disapprove of the policy that's going here and the camel's nose under the tent, so to speak. But what it was said is correct. Do we want to hold it in accounts that we can get our hands on, or do we want to send half of it into a constitutionally inviolate account right now? And I think probably we want to put it in accounts we can get our hands on for the remainder of this budget. And so I approve of that, but fundamentally I disapprove of where they went with this. It's two bad options, but this amendment is the better of the two bad options.
I'm confident we have not only bad options. Any other member for their second time? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I still have some concerns on this. I do think it's good to keep it liquid, but I don't want to put, the PWMTF reserve account has distributions into SIPA, and losing $1 of this to SIPA is just the wrong approach. And we have other vehicles that are still out there. There's the potential to create other vehicles if those vehicles fail. I just don't think this is the right approach. And so that's my opinion. I do think we should keep it liquid, but I don't think this is the right approach. So
Thank you very much. Any other member for their second time? We're on second time, third reading amendment number 27. Second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. And to answer the good representative from the basin, I had that same question when I saw this in terms of, but if you look at the language, it's as soon as practical at the end of the fiscal year. So you can take actions, is what the way it was described to me, is that in this budget, when you can take certain actions at the end of the fiscal year. So, and ladies and gentlemen, I just ask for your favorable consideration, and like I say, there are reasons to do this everything that was said just here today, but also because of actions by our good friends down the hall yesterday. So, thank you.
Thank you, members. We are voting on third reading amendment number 27, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. The next amendment for your consideration is third reading amendment number 11. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the same debate. You approved this, the body approved this on second reading for the common school account and the permanent mineral trust fund. And I just wanted to add in the excellence in higher education endowment. And it's about the size of the reserve account and to prevent this from tipping into the permanent fund. And so we grow the reserve account and it eliminates our paper deficit after year 3. And so you can see on lines 3 through 9 on the amendment, 10 million is deleted. And now the deposit is only going to be 5,645,000. That other 3 or 4 million will be used to fill up the reserve account, which you can see on line 22 of the amendment is 150%. And on line 26, we would move it to 225%. When I first came in the legislature, these reserve accounts were at 60%. Then we moved them to 90 and then 115 and then 150. And now we're trying to move them to 200 or 225 to give us that longer term profile. And eventually we'll want to move all this together inside the corpus, but that's down the road next year. Constitutional amendment talk stuff. But this is a policy to make our reserve accounts bigger, to guarantee if bad investments happen for multiple years, we can continue those services of the state. And so that's it. And you've approved it already on second reading. I left one account out, the excellence in higher ed. Thank you. Now, Mr. Speaker, I think I need to.
Would you move that amendment? Thank you very much.
First time I've ever done this. I'd move third reading amendment number 11, House Bill 1. My apologies, Mr. Speaker.
Follow the script. Follow the script. Any other members for their first time? Members for their first time? Members for their first time, seeing none. Second time, members, we're voting on third reading, amendment number 11, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Amendment has been adopted. Next amendment for your consideration is third reading amendment number 24. Chairman Nicholas. Just stand at ease, members. This is one of those ones that was an insert, so we're just making sure everybody has it, including the sponsor. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move the third reading amendment number 24 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. So, and I think of one second. Turn the explanation over to the good representative from Natrona.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, do you have a copy of this amendment, screen and color? It's 2-pager. Flip over to the second page, please. It's the same exact thing we just talked about. And so if you would go, this is now the Hathaway Scholarship Reserve Account. If you would go, members, to line 26 on page 2, you see where it says 4.5%. And then you can see, except for these fiscal years, we want to move that to 9%. And so we're basically, to equate that as a move similar to 150-ish to 225, similar to what we've done in these other three accounts now. The reason why it says 4.5% and not 200%, because we don't have a spending policy in the halfway account. It's actually the number of customers who qualify. So we don't have that 5% of the 5-year rolling average, but it is the same kind of layout. This will guarantee and eliminate that paper deficit years 3 and 4. And there's a little more, some folks know about how the Hathaway timing moves, but this is really another important part of this to eliminate the paper deficit. That is not real. Anyway, so it's the same issue. Now, if you go to the first page, what this does is deletes and reinserts, and I don't know why it's written that way, the amendment you just adopted on the excellence in higher education, exact same amendment. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we just vote aye if you want to do the same thing for the Hathaway account. Make the reserve account bigger like we've done for 3 accounts. If you want to keep the Hathaway the same, vote no. Higher ed is unaffected that you just adopted that. I would urge your aye vote. Do the same thing for the Hathaway account. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Summers, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And so no, this looks an awful lot like a bill in the budget. And so I really don't understand why we need to do this for 1 year. And what does it accomplish? We have plenty of money in the Hathaway for the Hathaway recipients. So why do we have to do this now? And this looks an awful lot like legislating in the budget to me.
Representative Gray for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we start getting these percentages and statute, it starts. Can this former speaker, I just want to understand the approximate dollar distribution, what account we're taking from and what we're putting in, rather than going through these percentages and statutes that are a little bit cryptic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? This is members for their first time, third reading amendment number 24. First time. Second time before the sponsor, second time, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to do the finger thing. It's probably the worst bill presentation I've ever done. But I am going to show you kind of a box up here, and that the good representative from Casper asked, how much is in the reserve account now? 26 million. It's 4.5% of the 5-year rolling average, which is 5-year rolling average is about 500 million. The market value today of the Hathaway is about 648 million. It's all good news. 26 million here. The spend on Hathaway scholarships is about 18 million a year. If you adopt this amendment, this account, because we're going to make probably 30 million off the Hathaway this year or more, and it's going to tip into here, and this will make that 46 million if we make 10 million or 36 million, and then 10 will tip into the corpus. That's not a bad thing. It's not bad at all. But what happens though is timing. And so then in August, we have to pay scholarships. There's nothing in this income account because it empties out at the end of the fiscal year, July 1st. So then you'll hear people say, well, the Hathaway doesn't have any money in it. We have to transfer from the reserve account. And it all goes back to 2005 when my co-chair on the Hathaway Scholarship Committee was a president of a community college. He didn't want the community colleges to wait till October to get their money. So we pay them in August. And so there's this pretend deficit for about 2 months. And then people say, oh, the Hathaway's broke, doesn't have any money. The Hathaway started at 405 million 12 years ago, 15 years ago, 648 today. So that's all this is. If you adopt this amendment, this 26 will grow to 52 before it tips again. And then it takes that longer profile out, 8 years of scholarships without a dime of investment income. So that's it. I hope I answered that. 26 million goes to 52 million. Vote aye. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We should probably have a rules committee on whether those are props or not. I don't know if there's anything Italian about the name Harshman, but he speaks with his hands. Members, any member for the second time? Members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 24, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Chairman is in doubt. All those in favor, please rise. Rise and stand still, Chairman Harshman. Your hands have stopped moving, but the rest of you still is. All those opposed, just a little less than 31. The amendment is adopted. Next amendment for your consideration. 19, Representative Gray.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You recognize me, right? Okay.
Proceed,
thank you.
Representative Gray,
Thank
with
you,
your
Mr. Speaker.
motion and your explanation.
I move third reading amendment number 19 to House Bill 1 and ask for favorable consideration. So what this does, remember, we were debating this budget a week before COVID. I'll never forget that sequence. You know, I drove back from that budget session. It was just like, wow. So what this does was it's a 2.5% decrease in travel, 231 and 232. And remember what we just experienced with COVID, it does double for the last year. And because we're in the last year of this biennial budget. So it's a $712,000 reduction. And the reality is our world has changed. We got a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of meetings occurring virtually. We can cut 231, 232 travel 5%. And so I asked for favorable consideration. I think it's a good reduction and vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? Chairman Nicholas, for your first time on the amendment 319, 3019.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, on and against the amendment, and the reason's pretty simple. If you take all of the cuts to all of the agencies, it averaged about 7.6% of all the travel budgets of all agencies in our budget cuts that we have already done, which is $2.3 million for this next year and $4.6 million for the next biennium. So almost every agency took some cuts out of their travel as part of these of the cuts to the the $335 million that we cut out of their budgets. So on and against.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? Chairman Kinner, or Representative Kinner, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please know that when we went through the budgets, we looked at these accounts very, very closely. And we did make considerable reductions. And also keep in mind that in 2016, these accounts were seriously reduced. But the reductions that we made were 7.6% just in these accounts. So please resist this additional thing. We have really taken a close look at this and really tried to get them down and be where they're at a real good point, considering all that's gone on. So please resist this. I would encourage it.
Thank you. Any other member first time? Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to add another reason to vote against this. It has been implied that Zoom will solve all of our travel issues, but there are many reasons to travel besides talking to people. For instance, construction projects that need to be overseen, which cannot be done by Zoom. So if we cut our travel budgets too heavily, we actually create another problem in the state, which is perhaps construction projects that don't meet our standards, so on and against.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Representative Jennings, first time, 319.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for. Our world's changed since last year, and this is just one of those things that there's places where we need to be looking at. And all of our time's changed. We all met all year. And so I think there's room here for this on and for.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time, third reading amendment number 19? Any other member first time, second time to the sponsor, Representative Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we heard that there is a 7% reduction in 231 and 232. Keep in mind, we didn't reduce this at all at the start of this budget. So we're 1 year in when this goes into effect, and they should have basically had zero travel for the last year. Now, even if they have some, I acknowledge there's probably some, but it's a 7% reduction off of the first year, which it should be very, very low. You would think it would be at least, a third of what they expected. So, take that 50%, a third of that is what, 15, 17. So you would think in this budget, you would be effectuating a 15 to 17% reduction in travel, and they're effectuating a 7% reduction in travel. I mean, it should be way higher than that. So please vote this up. Nothing bad is going to happen if you vote aye on this. So do the opposite of strongly resisting it, strongly support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 19, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Division. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed? Members, again, there are members off the floor, so I want to make sure that everyone that wants to be represented in these votes can be. So the vote is 23-35. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for your consideration is third reading amendment number 12. Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 12 to House Bill 1, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Friends, this amendment will take a little bit of time to overview, because it takes us back to how we got to where we are today. And I want to start a year ago, and actually we just heard a little bit about it. When we left here in March, all of a sudden the next day, we had our first case of COVID. Within a month, we joined the rest of the nation with the devastation. Within a month after that was the recognition that our economy was bottoming out. There's no two ways about it. We were in crisis. About the same time, the governor needed to begin his process for the supplemental budget. So what he did is he called in his agencies and he said, I need immediate cuts right now. And as we go into the supplemental budget process, I want more cuts. That happened late summer, early fall. And in unprecedented meetings, the chief executive called in every agency director and reviewed those budgets. And we saw step 2 cuts and then step 3 cuts. Step 2 cuts have already been implemented. And we heard over and over and over again that there is no more fat, right? There is no more fat. We did most fat in 2016. The little bit that was left was done with step 2 cuts. The governor then put in his budget step 3 cuts, right? Know when the governor put together his budget recommendation that then went to our JAC, that what he has available to him are the Craig projections. Okay, and that's it. So the Craig projections, which were awful, easily $600 million in a structural deficit, if not more. Then, and luckily, things got a little better. But also know that when the governor puts his budget together, he does not have access to the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account, the LISRA. And I said that name so that you could hear the first word in that phrase, legislative. It's ours. The chief executive cannot use that money in terms of putting together his budget. We've also just heard from the chair that there was $53 million additional dollars in our coffers in January. That brings us here. We have a governor's recommended budget that has been worked by the JAC. It includes those tier 3 cuts that everyone acknowledges are draconian to every state agency, and there will be hurt and harm. So what this budget amendment does is says, take away those tier 3 cuts, all of them. Because in my mind, not only are they not necessary, but we have the ability to use the rainy day account to fill them. Can you imagine a better use of a rainy day account, which is meant to even out bumps, than right now? This was an enormous bump. And there were important responses to that bump, both by the chief executive and our JAC. But it's our job, and we have the ability to use our account, which is the LISRA, right, to backfill. We can do it. Not only can we do it, but the impact on the bottom line of the LISRA is virtually nil. We will still have over $1 billion in that account. $1 billion. I want to go home and I want to say that I kept our people safe and secure, and I did it in a fiscally prudent way, and I used that rainy day account that everyone hears about in order to do it. That's what this amendment does. It restores those tier 3 cuts. It uses our LISRA to do that. And with that, I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Member for their first time? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so in support of the amendment, and I think the issue I generally have is historically and hopefully continuing, we really bifurcate our budget between general government and education. And based on the revenue streams, where we are with the price of oil and the stock market coming back and investments, this is the good case scenario. Things keep going good, price of oil keeps going up, and stock market doesn't take another hit. A couple months from now, we're going to say, hey, why do we have any level 3 cuts? We can cover this. But if you don't allow that back in the budget, then money just has to get moved around, which I really don't think is always appropriate. So I like this because it says, hey, we can restore this. We keep level 1, keep level 2. But as of right now, it's looking fairly good. But not that we should think that education funding is looking good. It is certainly not. And I know everybody hates the, well, everybody's been here for a while, this kind of belief that, we hurt general government to divert money to education, which we historically have not done. We've tried to keep them very separate, but that line is getting closer and closer to being blurred because the Constitution protects K-12 funding, where at least sometimes the anecdotal sayings in state employment circles are, hey, we keep taking cuts and hits and K-12 never takes any. Well, this is saying, hey, legislature, you have to solve the K-12 funding problem, and you have to do that completely differently than general government operations. You can't, because I don't want the belief out there, and I don't want people out there saying K-12 is not taking the same cuts that state employees are, because it's not fair. And so this says, We went to the brink, we hit level 2. We don't have to go into level 3 as of right now for the rest of the budget year. And if things get really bad again, we might have level 4 cuts. We can come back from a year from now, but this at least allows enough flexibility. And I find it slightly ironic and amusing that there's another budget amendment that restores half of these cuts coming up because it's looking better on the general government side. It is not looking better long-term on education side. But I feel pretty confident as a former chairman of revenue that, we can restore the money for the level 3 cuts and it's going to be okay.
Thank you very much, Representative Stiff, for your first time, third reading amendment number 12.
Mr. Speaker, on and against the amendment. Again, members, I think it's worth taking a look at the fiscal profile. I think the most recent one is from yesterday, the March 11th. If you look on page 3, line 36 of the fiscal profile, under the House status, it says that the amount that we have left to appropriate is $0, zero, okay? If you look one line up from that, it talks about a 2017 session law that provides for the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account backstopping deficits in the school foundation program. So if you look at that number on the goldenrod from yesterday, it's $313 million. What does that mean? It means that we are already taking $313 million out of the LISRA to pay for schools. And the projection is we will have to do that every year for the foreseeable future, unless there's a big structural change. So that backstop guarantee to the LISRA, it's my understanding, under the 2017 session laws, that is in effect until the LISRA drops below $500 million. So how many years does it take? If you're at 1.1 billion roughly right now, how long does it take at $300 million a year to deplete it down to 500? Well, a couple of years. So then LISRA's at 500. We are burning through the LISRA. This amendment says, go ahead and take another $63 million out of the LISRA. And I would submit that that's not fiscally responsible. So on and against.
Thank you, Representative Larson, Lloyd, first time, third reading amendment number 12.
I would encourage a no vote on the amendment, and largely because there's two things. The chief executive really could come, and I mean, he sent letters to us on other things. Certainly could send letters saying, would you do A, B, or C, and consider using funding sources such as the LISRA. I mean, so they could have done that. So he's not prohibited from doing that in any way or any of that. But I think what we've done is we've gone through a process, all of us together, and we've looked at these cuts in the agencies. You've listened to the committee that whose job it is to bring this to you. You've challenged us, you've agreed with us, and you've said some, in knowing full well the position of the state, you said some of these are warranted. Some of the step 2 are warranted, some aren't. Some of the step 3 are warranted, some aren't. I think a great example is what we've done in mental health. Mental health didn't take any step 1 or step 2 reductions. We had a second reading amendment that restored all of the step 3 mental health. You said no. This body said, no, we don't want to do that. Today we had a third reading where from the good chairman of labor health that brought that back in at half the amount. You says, yeah, that seems more reasonable. I think we've gone through a process to do that. I personally don't want to throw that extensive process that we've all participated in out the window and just say, let's just put everything back in and try and move forward. And so I think that we've been the refiner's fire and hope that you would support what we've done thus far and vote no on the amendment.
Thank you. Any other member first time? Any other member for their first time? Member for their first time, member Chairman Harshman, first
For my
time.
second. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any member for their first time? Member for their first time, second time? Second time before the sponsor. Second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to respond to, I think it was the last speaker. And in all honesty, I was concerned about the placement of this amendment, all right? It's a section 300. Part of me wished that we could have done it at the very beginning rather than at the end. So to understand that there's a choice, there really is a choice rather than the piecemeal approach that we went about it. And by agency and picking and choosing what we often call here winners and losers, because that's honestly what we did. Without the full recognition of honestly, how much money we do have available to us. And that reality again is we have over $1 billion in the LISRA. We did not put back that money for tier 3 cuts to mental health. We debated it. It went down again, honestly. And I would ask you, if you knew and understood that we, in fact, have that money, that we have it available to us, would you have voted that way? Because I think you would have voted differently. But we don't have the opportunity to go back and redo those votes at this point. But what we do have the opportunity to do is not pick those winners and losers for the next year, to understand that we do not have to do those tier 3 cuts, that we have the money in the bank, and that it will help our communities and help our people. So with that, I would ask for your aye vote.
Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 12, House Bill 1. All those in, just want to make sure I got the right amendment. Third reading amendment number 12 to House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment is 13, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, members, here's with that amendment that we defeated. You can see on that previous amendment 12, Mr. Speaker, I'd move third reading amendment number 13 to House Bill 1. Thank you. If you look on the previous amendment on line 16, it was 63 million. So let's just talk about what's happened in the last year. So phase 1. Remember, we had oil when -30 and no rigs, and then we did what was unprecedented. We did a May Craig, and it showed these devastating deficits. And so the first phase was 40 million bucks, executive branch. The next phase 2 was 335 million cut and 247 positions. Not all those were vacant, but a lot of them were vacant. We thought, okay, phase 1, phase 2, we'll get through this deal. And now the phase 3 that was just proposed that we voted down was 63 million, 106 positions. That doesn't count the private provider positions in your communities that you've heard about. And we restored some of those. There's still 106 positions out there though. And my point is, they're going to be pink slips. And on July 1st, we're going to grow the LSRA by 180 million. I don't know. That's the question we all have. And we refueled the 5% reserve account. So maybe we could leave here and just urge the chief executive, say, hey, use the reserve account to not do these step 3 cuts. So that's where we're at. And so my little amendment, and I tell you, Mr. Speaker, really, I think the key part, what I wanted to do was do half of these and say, but then on the second page of the amendment, on the last paragraph, that it was the intent of the legislature that the governor use This appropriation and transfer authority to delay general fund budget reductions identified as step 3 until at least November 1st. Why November 1st? Anybody know why November 1st next fall? It's October, Craig. We're gonna know what kind of money we have in October. And then we'd have, because we got a 2-year budget, so there's enough money, and then we're back here in January if something happens. So I just want us to know what we're doing and so my amendment, I don't think is gonna work. And I just think because of this first part, where it says on lines 1, 2, and 3, delete the Larson, Stith, and Nicholas amendments, and the Wilson and Conley amendments were not successful. So I don't think I can divide that out. I'd like to divide those out and let those amendments live and then run the rest of this. But I don't know if that's, I don't know if I can do that. And then ask for 23 million and ask the governor to, hey, watch this thing till October, Craig. Hey, we did a May, Craig, $1 billion general fund deficit. We did an October, Craig. Ooh, 600 million. We did January, Craig. Geez, we're almost there. And my hope in Wyoming is that in November, and high gas prices, gasoline, I know our people don't like it, but that's because high oil prices. I don't know. I think we're gonna harm some infrastructure of the state that we're gonna pay more money to go back and fix. And here we are on the 3rd reading of this thing, and I don't think we got a way to fix it. Because I don't think my amendment can do it, because I don't want to divide out the Larson amendment, because he did some good for those services and health. And I don't want to divide out the Nicholas amendment, because my amendment hurts our higher ed. It's going to lay off people there for no reason. So I think our only course of action probably at this point is to say, hey, when you visit with the chief executive, say, you got 112 million in your 5% statutory reserve. Maybe hold off on these phase 3 a little bit. Let's see. Let's wait till November, because then we'll have time to finish up the last 6 months of the budget when we're back here next February, Lord willing. Because I just don't think you need to send another 106. And I get it. Those first 247 positions, most of them were vacant. Not all of them, but most of them. I get that. We should do that. We've done it before. But these next 106, and they're not all in Cheyenne. And that's not counting the other hundreds that are providers that take care of a lot of people in the state. So I don't know the fix. So, Mr. Speaker, I think I have to withdraw this thing, but I want us to all know what we need to do on this, I think, is actually advocate to our governor to say, hey, let's cool our jets till November. And we'll take care of you the next year in the budget session. I think that's our only recourse. All right, so I withdraw this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for the longest withdrawal the Wyoming House of Representatives has ever experienced. Thank you very much. Members, next amendment for our consideration is 3rd reading amendment number 20, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill number 1, 3rd reading amendment number 20, and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, I came to this body with the intent of being very fiscally responsible in these very difficult times, and I asked you all to join me multiple times, and here's another opportunity. When the good chairman of Minerals brought an amendment to support carbon sequestration, I was very much in support of that. I think it's really visionary toward our future, and I think we need to fund those opportunities. But in having done so, we kind of went against my principle of taking that money and adding it to our budget deficit. So today I bring you an amendment which somewhat addresses that. I'm not reducing the budget deficit, but I'm taking money out of an account that has some money there and putting it into the LISRA account. And as we heard from the representative from District 48 just a moment ago, we have a $313 million deficit in education funding coming out of the LISRA account. We've got a few years before it's gone. Currently, law states that at $500 million, we go off of a cliff. We're in the midst of a negotiation to change that to $650 million before we begin taxing the people of Wyoming. So today I bring this opportunity to slow that down only slightly, but the same amount that we brought into the budget for this carbon sequestration. So with that, I ask for your favorable vote on this amendment, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative Bear. Members for their first time, Representative Summers, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against the amendment. This is a pot of money that was put aside for broadband development. We have a bill that's coming across from the other side that passed the other side on that whole program to make that program more workable, more usable. In a time when we're more dependent upon broadband, I don't want us to see us drain that account right at the time we're trying to make this program more user-friendly, frankly. And so I just urge you to defeat this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for the first time? Representative Jennings for your first time, third reading amendment number 20.
Yeah, yesterday I was a no on this because of where we took the money, but today I'm a yes on this. So broadband got 50 plus million. Somebody probably can tell me what that number is. And so this money was unspent. And so I look at this and applaud the bringer of this amendment because it is. They got a lot of money through the CARES Act. And here's an opportunity to not grow our deficit and still do a really good thing. So on and for.
Thank you. Any other member first time? Representative Gray, first time, 320.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is really a delicately crafted, tenderly crafted amendment that I'd urge and I vote on. I think that that was a pretty big appropriation at the end the other day. I'm totally supportive of coal, oil, and gas, but really there should be a pay for, and the broadband had a lot of COVID dollars put into it. So let's take some money out of the state fund side and put it towards this. And I think it's a well-crafted amendment. So I urge an aye.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I guess I shouldn't care where the money comes from, but I do. Coal, carbon capture, sequestration, utilization is a vision, a way for our state to be better, a way for us to grow our domestic product, to continue to thrive as a state. One of the other ways, and we're already seeing this right now, is through the development of broadband. And so I sit here and say, why are you pitting those against one another? And that's how I see this. And I, for one, and I may be in the minority, I don't know. But I don't think the LSRA is just simply there for education. I think that is a good backstop to education, don't get me wrong. But I also believe that how that LSRA was built up by surpluses in the general fund. And it is there, yeah, as a savings account. We also use it as an account for liquidation. But it should also be there for us when we need to move our state forward. So, we talk about, we're having a budget crunch. We don't spend money on certain things. And, those are all good arguments. And I agree that's being fiscally responsible. But also, you don't just pull your head in the shell, put your head down and hunker down and hope that things change. Sometimes you have to invest. You have to invest in new capital. You have to invest in new ideas. You have to invest in people. And you have to look on the horizon and have the vision and drive that vision. And so, again, I have lots of discussions with the bringer of the amendment. Him and I see the world pretty much the same way. And I do applaud him for bringing the amendment and for trying to find this, but I have a difficult time saying we have to sacrifice one vision for another vision when we have this wonderful opportunity that's, by the way, it's going to replenish to the tune of $180 million to $200 million. Let's use it. Let's use it for our vision. Let's use it to make our state better. Let's use it to leave Wyoming a better place. So I'm against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, ladies and gentlemen, for number one, we're going to have 900 million additional COVID dollars. And trust me, it's almost guaranteed that we're going to put some of that into broadband. So I don't see the need for this particular diversion. Number two, I know the US Congress, there's a bill in front of that to make broadband high-speed nationwide using additional dollars. And so it's a large project from the federal side. It's a large project on our side, and it's going to happen. So I would just say that this, it's the right idea to get broadband going across, particularly in rural communities, but it's coming. And we simply don't need this. So on and against.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time. Representative Newsom, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm on and against this amendment. I think we're diverting money from a really good project with broadband. Still, even after all of those funds have been allocated and spent, we still have communities that don't have adequate broadband coverage. We still have communities that are struggling to get all of their children online, and we're still struggling with telehealth, which is a growing industry. So I'd be on and against this amendment. Thank you.
Any other members for their first time? Does anybody not know where you're on the amendment? Representative Larson, Dan.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm on the amendment and for it. I just kind of wonder if we need that money going to the broadband. We have futuristic satellites that are going up there, I think I've heard. And maybe we can, maybe they'll be cheaper than the broadband and a lot faster. So I don't know if we need the money going to broadband.
Any other members for their first time? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And I always like optics. So when you go home in 3 weeks, what are you going to tell people? What did you do for the people, right? And so I would argue in this budget before us, we've done two major things. The first is we've diverted $10 million to try to keep carbon capture, keep our coal industry alive. We've done that for the people of Wyoming. We're taking a chance. We're optimistic. It's a way forward. We're taking a whole nother chance on this blockchain things and giving money and saying, hey, we're trying something new and out of the box as another option. Neither one of those might work, right? We have to be, we're taking two huge steps, might work in our favor, might not. But if it doesn't, what else are you doing? Well, we have a slow and steady increase in broadband. We're getting our state technologically online, trying to recruit people who can live anywhere now into the state. And we're doing that for people too. And so it shouldn't be a this or that. We have two major exciting issues that we hope to heck work, but if they don't, we're slowly beating the drum of economic development, getting our communities wired, getting fiber throughout the state to attract people here and let them live in Wyoming. And I think that's a good thing too. And you can go home to your constituents and say, we're doing it all. We're trying broad new things. And if they don't work out, you have a level budget and we're trying, a slow step economic development.
Thank you. Any member for the first time? Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. First of all, because I truly like the idea of offsetting expenditures. Maybe not small ones, but this one is a large one, and I do like that idea of finding the money to offset the expenditure. I'm familiar with I think it was over 27 projects for broadband that were done statewide through CARES money. One of the companies up in our neck of the woods got 18 million for a majority of those projects. They had to be done with those projects by December. So all the projects were completed. This money remains in the account. I also believe that CARES money coming forward, somebody mentioned 900 million possibility, will also have broadband in it as well as federal dollars. So I believe that account will be replenished and broadband can go forward in the future and we can have an offset for the carbon capture. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative, anyone else for their first time? First time. Representative Hallinan, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to congratulate my seatmate for coming forward with a purity of thought. He believes that we need to balance the budget. And I think he's right. However, this is a very popular program, this broadband thing. I don't think he's going to succeed, but I salute him for having the purity of thought and trying to do the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time. We're on first time, third reading amendment number 20. Any other member first time, second time? Second time, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Really urge an aye vote on this amendment. So a couple points I want to make off the debate. So, first, the chairman of appropriations points, I felt like he was talking for the amendment until he said, vote no. He said, there's going to be more COVID dollars they're going to allocate towards this. There's actually a bill that's coming that they're going to pay for the entirety. They're not thinking about the national debt, which is sad. It's a different issue, though. He said the federal government, they're going to pay for this all. So why are we using state funds for this? Is it just because it has a word in it, in the name of the account, that is very politically popular? I mean, I understand people support broadband, but I mean, just because the account has that word in it doesn't mean that you don't look at the external factors that are occurring around this account. The other point I wanted to respond to was the idea that LISRA is just being used as a backstop for education. The reality is that we need to make a choice. LISRA is a brilliant concept. I wish there were more there when we had more money. I really do. I think there could have been, $3.5 to $4 billion when I go back and look at it when we started having a decline, but it wasn't quite to that level. But it was good when all these monies were coming in, more than could have ever thought about how they could consider how to spend, because you had a 400% increase. I was looking at a presentation on this, a 400% increase in state revenues during that period, first decade of the 2000s, 400% increase. And they created this account. The brother of the chairman of appropriations, I love when he came in and said, they put that word on the top of it, legislative, because the legislative creation. It's a brilliant account. And the reality here is we need to decide what this account is for. And I view it as a backstop to the deficits in our main accounts. And we have two main accounts. And it's not a this for that thing. I mean, the reality is, what is our view holistically from 30,000 feet up of what this account does? And yes, our main deficit is K through 12. There's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is because this thing's on autopilot because of some Supreme Court decisions that I think were made at a moment in time when we had a lot of money, and probably will be revised if it went back there. And yet it's circular, because every time we try to do a reduction to, have another discussion about this, they say, well, there's Supreme Court cases that'll undo these reductions. That's one reason. The other reason is that it's almost impossible, because people are frustrated we can't get reductions because of the first thing, to divert any funds into there. That goes back to the online gambling bill. That's why those two reasons together are why you have a big deficit there. And where do those funds flow? They flow every time to the general fund. So the reality is that we have to decide what this account is for. And it's not this for that, but the way I view LISRA is as a backstop for our deficits. Our main deficit is K through 12. We got a lot of flows into the general fund. When it flows there, it gets spent. That's the reality. And so to say that this holistically is turning LISRA into just a backstop for one account, I reject that. But the reality is the amazing thing about this that I don't understand, I really don't get it, is that, it was said earlier that the federal government apparently is going to pay for this. So why are we still diverting state funds into this? I don't agree with that because of the debt, what they're doing to the debt, but is it just because the account that was created before this started has a word that is politically popular? It doesn't make any sense. And so I really urge an aye vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for their second time? We're on second time before the sponsor, second time. Representative Summers, second time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against the amendment. And I know that there were twice, I think, the amount of applications as they were able to give out in the short time period. They were able to get them out on those CARES Act dollars. This is state funds. There's still a lot of citizens in this state that do not have good broadband, some that don't have any broadband. So on and against the amendment, but in support of the 10 million out of the LISWR for that other project.
Any other member for their second time? Members for their second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really appreciate the debate, and I think there were great points brought on both sides. I just want to say I am also for broadband. And I think the information has been put before you that we have a great opportunity ahead of us to expand our broadband. We just need to wait, as the good chairman of revenue stated, in a few months, things will be better. And if that's true, then this won't be a problem. But if it's not, I'm committed to keeping our savings account as whole as possible. It was also brought up by the good chairman of minerals that we're going to have a great return on this investment if it's done right. If we put money into this carbon sequestration, and by the way, coal and the things that we've done with coal have funded almost everything in the state we have today. So the fact that we're going to try to invest in coal, we should get a return and we should be able to fund broadband. If by chance we get funds from federal government for that, I assume that we'll use it. We did during the COVID. With that, I just would really appreciate your support on this particular amendment and the fact that it is a fiscally responsible move. Thank you.
Members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 20 to House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed, please stand still for the count. The amendment has not been adopted, 2335. And members, I know that it may not seem obvious, but there's folks on both sides and behind the bar. So I want to make sure everybody gets the opportunity to vote. That's why I take some of these votes, even though I'm fairly confident in the vote, but we're going to take them both. So it has not been adopted. Next bill for our consideration, third reading, 21. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 21 to House Bill 1, ask for favorable consideration. So this is a chance for us to finish strong here with these last two amendments. Depending on how you look at it, we probably have not reduced on this. I mean, we had that amendment earlier on the water account. You could see that as a reduction because it's diversion. Possibly that's a reduction, it's debatable. But this is the true number one net reduction. This is a true net reduction, and we have a chance to pass this here as our last amendment. What this does, and this is an old friend here from second reading. So the efficiency report from 2 years ago said every agency has HR people. We don't need that. It's very inefficient. Let's centralize them. Governor signs an executive order in mid last year saying ANI is going to take over these positions. That occurred a week and a half ago. Money's being B11 right now, but they have not reduced. They haven't achieved a reduction at all. And the whole premise of this is you centralize the positions because there should be scale that you achieve when you centralize them. So you should be able to achieve a reduction. Now, yes, this is looking out a little bit in the future, but I'm worried that if you don't achieve the reduction relatively quickly, what happens is they get used to that level. And it will be almost impossible to achieve the reduction if they get used to where they're at right now. And so the idea here is that we're going to tell them, and if it ends up being more, that's fine. We're going to tell them that you can reduce 10% off the centralization because you're achieving scale, and you're going to do it by October 31st of this year. So what is that? It's 6 months, a little over half a year. And by then you should be able to achieve a 10% reduction from centralizing these positions because it's more efficient. And I would pose to you, if we're not able to do this, then what if we're not willing to follow through on these efficiency recommendations? That would be really disappointing. And so I'm just trying to help here, and it would be a $700,000 reduction, $712,000 reduction. And I really think it would be good to put this in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the members for their first time, third reading amendment number 21? First time. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. Folks, we had this discussion yesterday or day before yesterday. This transition is in progress right now. It hasn't happened yet. It's in progress. And we don't know what how this is going to shape up. So the idea that we're going to say you will do 10% or 20% it's just not the proper place and time. But the good news is the good bringer of this amendment has another amendment right behind it. This is probably a good amendment. And depending on what we find out from that information, then we can address this issue. So on and against.
Thank you. Any members for their first time? Additional members for their first time? First time before the sponsor. First time, second time to the sponsor. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, I guess you got to ask yourself, if we can't achieve a 10% reduction off this, what's the point? We got to have the follow through. And I think this is very reasonable amount. It's over half a year out. So let's vote aye on this. I think the idea that we can't achieve this, it's the wrong approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 21, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment, the last amendment for your consideration. Third reading number 22, Representative Gray.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This third reading amendment number 22 to House Bill 1. This is the compromise position. Talked to the director yesterday, sounded fine with it. Chairman of Appropriations sounds fine with it. It was just that there will be a report by October 31st of 2021 about the consolidation. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, first time, Chairman Nicholas.
Ladies and gentlemen, finish strong. Vote aye.
Any other members? All right. Members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 22, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. House Bill 1, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf excused. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn, no to aye. Henderson. Bear, no to aye. Fortner, no to aye. Banks, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Closing vote. The vote is closed. 49 aye, 10 no, 1 excused.
House Bill number 1, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 1 has passed the House. That's right. Members, go ahead and give your sounds a round of applause. Thank you, members. So members, we're going to expedite a few things here. We could certainly go into second reading, and there's going to be a motion from the majority floor leader to lay back some bills on second reading that have amendments, and then we're going to do third reading we're doing a second reading on the rest of them where there are no amendments, and then we'll come back to second reading on the ones that are laid back on Monday if you approve that motion. So, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, in accordance with House Rule 7-3, I move to lay back one day House Bill 96, House Bill 109, House Bill 151, and House Bill 173.
Does anybody object to that? Anybody objections? Representative Zwanitzer?
Thanks. I'd object to 96. It has a 2-second amendment.
So there's an objection to 96. Any other objections to laying back of 109, 151, or 173? Seeing none. All those in favor of the laying back of House Bill 109, 151, and 173, please say aye. Those opposed, no. 109, 151, and 173 are laid back one day. We're at that order of business on bills on second reading. First bill for our consideration is House Bill 96. We have an amendment. Chairman Zwanitzer. Oh, sorry. We'll do the reading first. Follow the script.
House Bill 96, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd, treatment of animals and act relating to animals.
We have an amendment. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 96. Ask for your favorable introduction Members, this is the amendment that makes the statutory language align with the bill that was a agriculture interim committee bill that realigned all of the animal protection statutes. So nothing here besides LSO moving language around for the correct citations. Be happy to answer questions, but it's just housekeeping.
Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1, House Bill 96, please say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 96 is passed committee of the whole. Whatever. Second reading, House Bill 96, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hear no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 112.
House Bill 112, sponsored by Representative Clausen, lifetime pioneer trapper's license, an act relating to game and fish.
House Bill 112, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 116.
House Bill 116, sponsored by Representative Worf, concealed carry residency requirement 2, an act relating to concealed weapons.
House Bill 116, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 136.
House Bill 136, sponsored by Representative Yin, inclusive ballot language, an act relating to elections.
House Bill 136 has been, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next bill is House Bill 144.
House Bill 144, sponsored by Representative Brown, electric vehicle fee updates, an act relating to multi-purpose vehicles.
House Bill 144, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next bill, House Bill 163.
House Bill 163, sponsored by Representative McGuire, federal congressional elections, residency, an act relating to elections.
House Bill 163, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 174.
House Bill 174, sponsored by House Education, local government sales and use taxes, an act relating to sales and use taxes.
House Bill 174, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 212.
House Bill 212, sponsored by Representative Provenza, criminal record expungement revisions, an act relating to criminal procedure.
House Bill 212, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 79.
House Bill 79, sponsored by Representative Duncan, subdivisions, an act relating to real estate subdivisions.
House Bill 79, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader,
Mr. Speaker, just a quick privilege of the floor.
please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And, I want to thank our Appropriations Committee for all their hard work. I know, having served on that for 4 years, all the labor they put into this, and then we come in and we try to beat it all up. And they put in a whole lot of work, and I just want to give a big round of applause to all of our members of Appropriations.
Surely that was enough applause. After the beating some of us took, some of you took. Thank you very much, Appropriations Committee. It is appreciated. Messages from the Senate? Messages from the Senate?
Message 223. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 122, Wyoming Agriculture Authority. Ayes 26, noes 4. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 224. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 124, Defending Wyoming Business, Trade, and Commerce Amendments. Ayes 27, noes 3. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message number 225. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 148, requirements relating to depositors amendments. Ayes 28, noes 2. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 226. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 157, property rights, limitation on local authority. Ayes 22, noes 8. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 227. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 30, Pandemic Response Review Task Force. Ayes 16, noes 14. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 229. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 1, General Government Appropriations. Ayes 18, noes 11, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that cleans the week's desk.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. Monday, the 15th day of March 2021, snowstorm, hopefully we'd get back.
Committee announcements. Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9 will be Monday, March 15th, 2001 at 8 a.m. The meeting is in person and online, so I fully anticipate to meet one way or the other. We will, again, for the committee to consider, we've already closed public testimony, but House Bill 248, 258, and 155 to give the committee some time to work that. Then we will hear House Bill 239, Workers' Compensation Student Learner Agreements, and then House Bill 196, Workplace Transparency Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations Committee will meet Monday at noon to hear 219 and 244, and then the re-referral of 241 and the continuation of 254. And on adjournment, your House Appropriations Committee will meet to discuss and review Senate File 1.
Thank you. Chairman Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 5 will plan on meeting Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock to finish Senate File 25. Hopefully we'll all be back from the to the Capitol by then. But if not, we'll still possibly use the Zoom option for any of us that can't get back.
Thank you. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet Monday morning at 7:30 to consider 4 bills. In order, House Bill 253, University of Wyoming ban on funding for abortions. House Bill 161, Human Life Equality Prohibiting Discriminatory Abortions. House Bill 70, Abortion Informed Consent. And House Bill 134, Human Heartbeat Protection Act. We will just hear presentation of the bills and public testimony. Then upon adjournment, Mr. Speaker, we will consider the same 4 bills as time allows to work the bills. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet Monday morning at 8 a.m. in E001 of the Capitol Extension to hear House Bill 247, Law Enforcement Hiring Practices, Senate File 23, Public Meetings, Executive Sessions for Security Plans, and Senate File 110, Small Claims Procedures.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 7, Corporations, will meet Monday at noon in E5 to hear House Bill 16, Improvement in Service Districts, House Bill 187, Elected Official Residency, and House Bill 72, Transfer of Water and Sewer District Operations.
Thank you. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet upon noon recess on Monday,
In E3, to consider the following bills, House Bill 106, Wyoming Education Options Act, that'd be a continuation of that. House Bill 231, College Credit Retention. House Bill 97, Interstate Compact for Education Withdrawal. And if time allows, House Bill 177, Education Understanding Federal and State Government.
Any other announcements? Any other announcements? So members of the House, well done. I know this has been a long week, a lot of hours, a lot of thought, a lot of debate. Next week, we'll have an equally busy week, quite honestly. We'll finish up the education bills Monday and Tuesday, hopefully Monday and Tuesday. And then we'll have final reading committee of the whole on Thursday, our final committee of the whole on Thursday. So there'll be several long days as well next week. Please be safe if you are traveling. Please monitor your email so that if there is a significant storm in the southeast part of Wyoming and government operations are significantly curtailed, staff is unable to conduct our session on Monday, we will try to have that out to you in ample time so you're not put in harm's way by traveling. So remember that if we do go ahead and you do not want to travel, we can put as many as you want to be on the remote option. There is a hybrid option for any member, and several members have already indicated that they're going to take that up no matter what the storm does. So anyway, be safe. Take good care of yourselves. The House is adjourned until 10 a.m. Monday, March 15th, which will be our 20th halfway point of the 66th Wyoming General Session. We are adjourned.